We're here to help Americans solve their money problem, help them take back control and see that they don't have money problems. They actually have money patterns. Today, I'm going to dive in deep with a fellow peer infinite banking practitioner, Brian Fouts, and you got to see what this guy is going to share with you because you're going to be floored by his journey and the perseverance, the courage, and his willingness to be vulnerable. So make sure that you're watching what's next. Welcome. Happy, thankful Thursday. What's up, James? Everyone on the left coast, the west coast, east coast, in between, all over the country. What concoction are you drinking or putting down right now?
Apple cider vinegar and sparkling water. Yep.
That is your drink of choice, huh?
No, but anything to keep the numbers down.
Stay
Yeah.
healthy, huh? That's awesome.
Well, my average sugar intake is about 7 grams a day right now.
That's awesome. Patty and I are on a sugar-free diet as well. I know we're not here to talk about sugar, but it's not any different. I'm going to make a wild statement right now. It's not any different than infinite banking. I watched a nutritionist that is a top level, actually working with the government to fix our food system.
Oh,
Tony
jeez.
Robbins nutritionist, and he did a presentation, Fouts, and you wouldn't believe it. When I got done watching it, I was my wife was watching, and I literally went and said, "Oh my God." It was like 1914. A doctor around that time said, "Sugar is horrible. Sugar is going to drive a bunch of diseases." And then look what happened to our food industry. There was no such thing as the four horsemen, the things that kill the most Americans now, heart disease, right, and cancer, everything else back then. But that guy was ignored as a kook. Sounds familiar, doesn't it, Brian?
Oh yeah. Yep, for sure.
Well, welcome,
Yep.
brother. I'm grateful to have you here. I'm going to have you announce yourself in a second. So, what we're doing today, everyone, is we want to take you on Brian's journey and talk about, where he was when he first learned about this. What was he doing before this? And kind of introduce you so you can see what kind of problems Brian's solved, what kind of struggles he's had, and just his real story. Because truthfully, I don't know the whole story. I know my brother here knows a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm excited to dive into this. So, welcome, Brian.
For sure.
Share a little bit about yourself before we hop into this with the audience.
Yep. Hey everybody, Brian Fouch here. And yeah, I didn't know about infinite banking for most of my life, like most people. But yeah, I definitely did hear about it many years ago, way before I knew about the book or who Nelson Nash was and even how it worked. And I even had a policy and didn't even know what it was.
Hmm.
So yeah, so I've been in corporate America. I've been an entrepreneur. I've done all the stuff that I thought I was supposed to do. Learned a lot of painful lessons, but we'll dive into that here in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to have you here, and I appreciate you sharing your time with our audience. So, walk me back, kind of, what does your financial life look like before IBC? Like, what did a normal month look like for Brian Fouts? Income coming in, where's it going? Like, what does your life look like?
Yeah, so gosh, it was many years ago. I was born, but when I was growing up, I was never taught about money. So my family, they didn't speak about it. It was just kind of this other thing that we never put any attention on. And my parents, we raised me very well. They're still together, all that kind of stuff. But I was raised low income. I remember in the mornings, it was so cold in our house. I didn't want to get out of bed because when that meant whoever got out of bed had to go start the fire, stoke the fire, get the fireplace going. That's just how I grew up. Not poor per se, but just didn't have money. And fast forward, I was taught to go do what everybody else around me was doing. Go to school, try to get good grades. If you can, go to college to get a nice job. So that's exactly what I did. And of course, when you go on that journey, you're not taught about money. Obviously, not going to be taught about how banks make money off of you. You're not taught how, what things like infinite banking are. And it took me some many years to learn that kind of stuff. But here's what happened, Jason. I had a house. I had a car with a loan on it. I had the credit cards. I had student loans. I was drowning in debt, and I did not even know it.
So
And this was
you were doing the very, I mean, with how we help people, you were in a very normal place that most people find themselves in. How
Exactly.
did that feel? Like, can you remember, like, what did that feel then? Like, how did you feel when you were in that situation?
So it's kind of interesting. So on the outside looking in, people would tell me, "Hey, Brian, you're living the American dream." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I just accepted that. Now, knowing how the American dream terminology came to be, like, I kind of have a very different opinion on that now. But I was like, "Okay, I guess." I didn't really know how to feel. But I did know one thing, and it was that I was not happy. I was not satisfied.
Mm.
And I didn't like my job that I had. I was in construction, by the way, went to school for that, and that's what I did for many years, 14 years or something. I didn't like the job, but it was what my brother did. So
Okay.
I just kind of followed his path. And
Okay. So
then,
he's your older brother.
yeah, older brother. And he hated that job too, by the way. He ended up quitting and became a firefighter, which I kind of look back like, I should have kept following him, but I stayed in construction and just did not like it. But once again, when I try to think back as to what my financial life looked like back then, I couldn't even tell you because I didn't know back then. I had no clue. And I had a 401k. I remember watching that thing go, took many years to get it up to about $100,000 and then watched it go from that down to I think it was 60 or $40,000. I mean, just collapsed in 2008 and nine. And I'm like, okay, what should I do? I looked around. Oh, same thing everybody else is doing. Just keep doing that. Don't change path.
Yeah.
And it took
Yeah.
like
Because what did they tell you? Like when you said, "Oh man, this feels wrong," well, then you look around, everyone else is still doing it. What did they tell you? Like what was the advice you got, and why did you keep doing the same thing?
keep doing it. Just keep doing it. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's what I kept doing. But, and then here's what happened. This is infinite banking. So that was my life. I was still working that construction job, and my wife and I got pregnant.
Hmm.
And we had my daughter Zoe. She's about ready to turn 16.
Wow.
And I was like thinking to myself, you know what? I probably should have some life insurance because I was the main income earner, right? I'm like, okay, where do I go? Well, I did what everybody else did. I went to my buddy, the financial planner.
Okay.
And yeah, and so I said, "Hey man, I probably should get some life insurance." He goes, "Oh, I got a great thing for you." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Cash value life insurance." That's what he called it, I believe. Not infinite banking, by the way. But it's a cash value life insurance. You can use this as a retirement vehicle. You can fund this thing. You can borrow from it down the road. Be your bank kind of thing. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. I'll go and get that. And so
Sounds
that was
pretty
my first
good. Yeah.
policy.
Sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that was my first policy.
And this is
And
what year? So you're
oh
2009,
gosh,
2000. Do you know what year this was?
um, 11, 12, something like that.
Okay.
Something like that. I actually still have the policy, by the way, and I just for various reasons for the death benefit only now. But I got the policy and then didn't think about it anymore for years. Never thought about it. Now I want to pause here and Jason, I want to ask you a question. Why do you think I didn't think about the policy?
Well, I mean, you got what you needed, right? You solved your problem. I would guess. I mean, just from what you just told us, that you
Right.
solved the problem. Your wife's pregnant, you're having a daughter, and you're like, I just need to protect and provide for my family and make sure they're secure if something happens to me.
Yep. And so that's what I did. And the gentleman who set this up, by the way, he was managing over at that point in time 500,000 of funds for me. Okay. And he didn't teach me anything about how to use this policy. That was the big catch right there. He didn't teach me any at all. Why? Because he wasn't doing it himself.
Hmm.
He sold me a product that he pitched to me that he's not even doing, which kind of, when I found out later on, I'm like, okay, that's a huge red flag right there. And I kind of said, hey, I'm going to make sure I remember this in the future. Long story short, I said, hey, I'm going to leave corporate America. So I'd had the policy for, oh my gosh, I'd had it for 7 years now at that point in time. So I'm going to leave corporate America. And I did. And I became an entrepreneur, got into real estate. So that was my
Okay, so
first.
you left corporate America, you left being in construction, and about when? Like when did you make that change? And kind of what had you make the change? You already said you followed your brother, but what had
So
you make the change? Why did you leave corporate America?
because I started learning about how money worked.
Okay.
Now, I had
Who were
just
you
scratched.
learning from? Like who were your mentors? Like where were you learning? Like
So, so the first person I learned from was that financial advisor because he did think a bit alternatively. Obviously, not the way I think now, of course, but he started teaching me a few things. A lot of it was like the basics, needs versus wants, expenses and liabilities and assets. But then I started studying Robert Kiyosaki. So I started working, work or not working, but working through his books. and just studying those things and learning how money truly works. And that's really what opened my mind up. And I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go get into real estate. So I got into real estate with a strategy called subject to investing, which is subject to an existing mortgage. And I had success doing that. And then I said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and leave this corporate job, go into real estate full time with my brother, by the way. And that's what we did. And had success doing that. And then I said, hey, I want to go do something different. And this is one of my huge lessons learned. I should have stayed with real estate and kept doing it, because after I learned how money really works, I realized that real estate was the ticket. I'd already been successful there. So I should have built the foundation of wealth with what had already been successful.
Hmm.
And instead of trying to chase the easy button or chase the big shiny object, they call it the shiny object syndrome. That's what I did for.
I was going to ask that. I'm like you because I hear you talk all the time, brother, and I'm always like, wow, he knows a lot about a lot.
Yeah.
And so this is what I had wanted to have you on. I wanted to hear what the journey was. So you're in real estate, you're successful. What was the next shiny object? Where did you go? Like,
It was entrepreneurship. So I thought I was an entrepreneur, but a true entrepreneur is a business owner. And that's what I didn't understand. I was like, oh, I'm an investor, I'm an entrepreneur. No, I was just having fun playing with some money, but I really hadn't got there yet. And so I said, hey, I'm going to go get into a business. So we ended up acquiring a business. And so I was the financial advisor gentleman was the lead guy that kind of helped orchestrate this whole acquisition of an existing business. Raised capital over seven figures, by the way, to acquire a business. It was an existing one. That existing business was a financial education business, and the advisors inside the business that created the content were Robert Kiyosaki's personal advisors.
how wild is
So
that? Okay.
yeah, wild. And so I literally was flying to their offices. I have videos of all this stuff, meeting with them in person, learning from them directly, filming content of these lessons and strategies. And of course, one of them, Patrick, was an infinite banking practitioner. And he'd been doing it for years, had learned it from, oh gosh, it's one of the people that co-wrote one of Robert's books, by the way. And I spoke to her before. And he became my mentor in infinite banking. But I remember this. When I first started talking to him, I'm like, wait a second, infinite banking and life insurance. I'm like, holy cow. I realized that's what I had.
If you're enjoying this content, make sure that you're smashing that button, that you're liking the video, and ringing the bell so it can turn blue to share this message. Get this out there to more people who need to know how they can change the system they're in by changing one thing.
Now, I want to back up for a second though. So when I became an entrepreneur, it was when I first had a massive financial loss. That's how I look at it. So when I acquired the business, I signed on the dotted line. My financial advisor declared bankruptcy the following week.
Hmm.
He's the one that had actually orchestrated raising the capital. His name was not on the dotted line. Only mine was. That was a huge lesson learned right there is, hey, when you start signing documents, make sure you understand the implications of that. So I acquired a business with seven figures of debt. I lost $500,000 the following week, and I had moved my real estate portfolio into his corporation, and I lost it all,
Wow.
which was all of my cash flow too. So I went from within a span of a week to having assets, good net worth, cash flow, to being worth a large amount of negative money and zero cash flow and debt that I could not comprehend. And I literally had at that point in time 45 days to make $100,000 payment. Otherwise, I would lose the business and lose even more. And I had no cash flow. And the business had $5,000 in the checking account. That was my start right there to entrepreneurship.
What year was this? What year is this?
2016.
2016. Wow.
Now, keep in mind, I had a policy. I had infinite banking, but I didn't know it yet. And so, long story short, I got to work. And when you hear people say that your network is your net worth, I am 100% in belief of that, because that's what I did. I reached out to my network, started doing things. I actually ended up raising or actually generating 100,000, 140,000 it was, yeah, in revenue within 30 days, and made that payment and kept the business. And that was my start. And then I just kept doing that for a long time. But through that journey is where I learned a lot of stuff that we've talked about, Jason. I learned marketing. I learned, business. I learned, hiring and firing and all these things that you never really hear about in school. I learned how money worked, but I learned it from these advisors that were advisors to Robert Kiyosaki and those kinds of individuals. And yeah, so that was how I got my start. And that's where I learned about infinite banking. It was literally 5 years after my first policy is when I learned about what I had. But I also learned what I had was not the best engine for infinite banking.
Yeah, I was waiting to see where you're going to go with that next. So
Yeah.
walk us
So
through
what
that.
I
So now you're with some of the best financial minds in America, right? Some of the sometimes controversial, right? You hear things
oh, for
like,
sure.
right, savers are losers and things like that, right? You hear these
Yeah.
different things from Kiyosaki and
Yep.
his group. So now you're surrounded by just a higher level of financial thinking.
Mhm.
Now you've just told us like you were up against the wall and had to figure it out and you realized, look, I got a network, you made it work, you started learning all these other things. But what was next? Like what was next on the journey with what we're talking about with banking, with taking back control, like with really having this? Because people want to hear how you solved your problems using
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. And so my journey is a bit different on how I solved it a little bit. So when I learned about it, I learned that, okay, what I have is what's called a variable universal life policy, or a VUL. It's a version of an IUL, by the way. And I was putting money into this thing, but I'll just break it down really quick. For the first 5 years, there was no cash value. Not maybe 4 years. There was nothing. I couldn't even use it as infinite banking. Then it started building cash value slowly. It has cash value today. It has cash value, not even close to what I put into it. So this policy will never break even.
Hmm.
So that's the first right there. It'll never break even, meaning that I have more available inside of it than I put into it. And if I kept this policy, which I'm not going to for my life, but if I kept it, it'll eventually go to zero no matter what. 100% will go to zero unless I start dumping in huge amounts of money in my like 60s. It'll go to zero. So that's why when you hear us talk about what's the best engine or vehicle for the infinite banking concept, it's whole life. I'm living proof of that because I had an opposite policy and I looked at it and I'm like, okay, why does this thing suck? And I started asking questions. And that was really what started me on the infinite banking path, is learning about what I had first and then saying, okay, but how can I use this? What can I do with it? And it was just mind blowing. And so I started actually learning about it, but then I started teaching it. So Jason, part of what I was doing with my business is I was teaching what I was learning at the exact same time.
Hmm.
And that was what I love doing. I love learning something and then teaching it and kind of learning it and teaching it. It
Yeah,
just
let's
really,
pause. Let's pause there because I think this will serve
yeah.
everybody watching, no matter what your business is. This is what my mentor, who learned directly from Mark Nelson Nash and was a fiduciary with 40 wealth management offices. When I said, "Oh my God," like when I asked for a financial philosophy and he handed me the book, most of you have read it. When he handed me this book, Brian, and I got super pissed, and you know the story. But anyhow, the point being is what he had me do is what you're talking about. So I want you to talk about why. Like I went in for 120 days, I learned something and I made a minute long video teaching it
Mhm.
for 100 days straight because I had no financial background, like none, like less than none. Like I avoided it like the plague. So,
Now, I had a unique opportunity, so just keep that in mind. What I did was I went to my mentor's office and we filmed for 2 days straight, filmed content on infinite banking. So I'm literally sitting here talking to him, asking questions, analyzing it, and learning it at the exact same time I'm filming content for my members. It was awesome. And so that was my first kind of deep dive into it. Him teaching me, then I turned around and I built a course out of the content that we created.
mhm.
And that course, so people that would come into my sphere, they could actually purchase that course for a small little fee to learn about infinite banking. And so I automated the teaching of infinite banking. Now, keep in mind, this is before, YouTube and Facebook, all that stuff were a big deal. Like this was not even on there yet. And that keep that in mind once again, right? So then I started doing webinars. So I built webinars back in 2010 and 2011 on infinite banking. So obviously Chris and some of the guys that we know, they saw those back then. And they actually have copies of some of the stuff that I created. And so I started doing webinars, and that's actually how I blew that business up. It grew really fast. And it was through teaching the infinite banking concept. Now, if I had the same situation today, I wouldn't do it, by the way. So just I want to make sure we're very clear on that part of it. I wouldn't do that again. Because doing what I do now, I think we make a lot bigger of an impact how we teach it. And also, I was not doing policies. So I was actually just on the education side, but not the policy creation side of it. That came later on. So that was
And
my first phase. It was just learning it and
okay,
teaching it.
so we're learning, right? You're still your journey went from working in construction, following your brother's footsteps, to real estate, to shiny object syndrome, buying a business, being almost broke in the business, and now you're creating education around this. And I'm
Yep.
amazed about how everything's always a blessing or a lesson, right? So like you, even though your story isn't the typical story, it's
No.
still it's an incredible story because now you're passionate about this, right? So tell me where that passion took you next. So now you're teaching it, you're running a business. Like, what was the next step?
Yeah, so I was doing that. We were spending like 100 to 150,000 a month on Facebook ads. We were starting to do YouTube and on infinite banking. And what happened was is well, this is a big lesson learned for everybody who's listening, especially if you're in business. My business was on the Inc. 5000 list. We were doing multiple seven figures of revenue, but I didn't so having the right mentors is key. Now, I wasn't working with my infinite banking mentor anymore, by the way. Nobody said, "Hey, Brian, if you're doing that kind of revenue, are you taking any off the table and putting it through policies?" Because once again, I could teach infinite banking, but I wasn't on the implementation side.
Yeah, you weren't living it yet. That's what I'm hearing. You weren't living
Correct.
it yet. You're
Yeah. I was using it a little bit. So I had the one policy and I had used it for small things. So this is my first usage of infinite banking was actually just small things like Christmas. So
okay.
what I would do is I would use the policy for like Christmas instead of using a credit card or something. I would use my policy and go spend, 500,000, whatever it ends up being. And that was my VUL, by the way. And that's how I learned how it functioned. And then I would go do something like, hey, we're going to go on vacation. I would just pull out $2,000 rather than pulling out my savings, go do that and pay myself back. So I was doing it right there. But once again, nobody was teaching me how to implement this thing. I was just doing it on my own, right? But then I had people coming through this course. The question you should ask me right here is, well, how are they being taught how to implement it?
Hmm.
So I had somebody else over here, another group that was doing the policies and the education on the implementation side. So I kind of would hand it off and then I'd be out of the picture. Once again, I wish I could go back and actually be on both sides of the equation. Jason, how much do you think I left on the table as far as revenue that I could have generated for me personally?
Quite a bit because you're helping people solve their problems. And that's what we're here to help people solve today, right?
Yep.
We want to help your thinking. You're hearing Brian like openly, vulnerably share his journey. And it wasn't perfect because this is why I want to do this, Brian. Because
Mhm.
people like when they see success, when they see us talk about on our AMAs and other things, they see us talking about the success and the people we see winning. But what
Yeah.
we don't maybe mention enough is where it's uncomfortable, where we're doing things where it's like, I took my first policy loan, Brian. I had $76,000 lost for a week because I filled out a wire number instead of a routing number. No one could tell me where my money was. I literally was losing my mind. So like that's what I like. So now you've left tons of revenue on the table because
Oh my.
again, you're just building you're building the airplane as you're flying it.
Yep.
What's next? Like, what was the
Yeah.
next thing for you to kind of be where you're at today and to
Mhm.
implement more? Like, when was the next policy, or what was the next thing that you did?
Yeah. So what ended up happening is the that business it was doing really well, but as we know, COVID caught up to a lot of things.
Hmm.
So I grew it in 2020, actually, is when I started growing that business the fastest. Um, and then I was seeing Chris Noggle and some other people on Infinite Banking side. I'm like, okay, I really got to get into this. And then what happened was is the business and Facebook and everything started going the other direction. So ad costs went up, people stopped spending money, and the business ended up in being negative for a couple of years before I had to shut it down. And I had to pull the plug. And that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do was you have this business that it seemed like it's your baby. It seemed like it was so successful, and it was teaching something I loved, infinite banking. It was the thing that was not all I taught, of course. That was just one thing I did in that business. But I was like, why is this happening to me? That was the thing I kept saying
Yeah.
in my head, which by the way, is not the right languaging. But and I knew better. But you got to understand, sometimes when you get hit and you get knocked down, you got to kind of watch how you think. And that was my biggest thing right there, Jason, was I had to change my way of thinking. So I shut that business down. I basically had to start over again. Like that, and that was my second time starting over. And I said, "Well, in my life, what has been the most, not successful, but what is something that's been the most consistent?" And it was always infinite banking.
Hmm.
When I go back to it, I said, this has always been the thing that has been the most consistent for me. Why am I not doing more of that?
And why do you think that is? I mean, because I've heard you talking about crypto courses, real estate courses. Like
That's
I've heard like again, I said this guy knows a lot. Like he knows stuff that I've never even done. So how is this the thing? Like why did this make sense to you?
because when I looked at the longevity of that strategy compared to other things, it beat everything else out. Real estate may be kind of aside a little bit, but all the things that I had personally been involved with, I mean, I've invested in oil and gas, private lending, precious metals, private debt. I own private debt. That was actually really lucrative, to be honest, but hard to do. Lots of strategies. Infinite banking by far was the most consistent thing there. And I'm like, okay, if that's the most consistent thing there, and I love to talk about it, why am I not just doing that? It's the 80-20 rule, by the way. It's Pareto's principle, right? I realized when I go back and look, 80% of all my success had come from 20% of what I actually did. And it was
Hmm.
infinite banking. I'm like, why not focus 80% on the 20% now? That was the big flip that I made. And I
Okay.
did that, quite a few years ago and said, I'm going to go just full into infinite banking and
So
just start
this
talking about,
realization was roughly around what year? Like that you just like I'm going all in on
oh my
this.
gosh, what year is it right now? 2026? 2022, 23, something like that. Yeah, probably 2023. And so yeah, and so I said, hey, I'm gonna go full on with this, and that's exactly what I did. And I actually ended up acquiring another policies. So have I'm not sure how many we have, three right now, and we're gonna open up. I think this year probably four more. So three are all my kids,
Okay.
and but I ended up buying an existing policy as well. So I didn't know I could do that, and then came across something. I'm like, hey, I'll just do this and bought a policy. I'm like, no one's saying anything. This is awesome. I've got another policy, and I won't go into the details, but it was such a good deal. I cannot believe that it happened. I was like, this is awesome. But then I started using it. So I started using infinite banking just in my life because I said, hey, how are other people using this? Like that was a great question right there. Was how are other people using this? So my thing that I did next was get rid of bad debt.
Hmm.
So I've always taught that bad
Okay, so
debt.
we're here now. You've acquired policies. Just we're slowing it down so people can hear how you solve the problem. So you're hearing Brian's thinking. You're hearing about. I'm sensing there's a lot of busyness.
Oh gosh, it was before I made the change. My life was in it was like what did they call it? Someone who was close to me called it something. It was like controlled chaos or something like that. That was my life, and I was done with that. I was tired of it, and so I said I want to get out of this, and that's when I made that whole transition to infinite banking. And I shut a lot of things down that I was focusing on, and I simplified my life. That's really what I did, and uh, and I said, I'm going to and I take a certain amount of time and I'm going to do this one thing.
I love that. And
And
so if anybody listening here resonates with that, drop an I in the chat, like
yeah.
controlled chaos or chaos. Now Brian's going to tell us, he starts realizing, like I'm hearing you say, I've known about this. I've been teaching this. I've been involved in this. And now it's time for me to really live it. That's what I heard you say. It's time to live it. And so what was the first thing that this solved for you? Like, and how did you use it?
So the first thing I solved was is just controlling cash flow a bit more because I was money going out every single week, every single month, just going out, going out, going out. And I realized I got to stop doing that. I got to get more control of the money that I have, where it's coming, where it's going, etc. So that was the first thing it allowed me to do was to actually flatten out my cash flow.
Okay.
So think of it like if you're a business owner and you have receivables, like you have 30 days before they can pay you, right? Or they got to pay you in 30 days. But guess what? You've got to pay your employees today. Well, how do you do that? So people will use like a line of credit to bridge that gap. That's essentially what I did with a policy, but for my personal life. I was bridging the gap between money going out and when money would come in.
Hmm.
That was the first thing I did, and I was like, this is awesome. But I wasn't even at that point still wasn't even getting rid of the bad debt. I was getting more control of the cash flow.
Yeah, you start
And
understanding. You follow this. I call it the sixth law of wealth, but you start understanding what's coming in, what's going out, and now you're controlling. You're aware of your money. That's the first thing. You got to weigh in the wrestle, Brian. So now you know what's happening, and then what? What's next?
yeah. So then the next thing I said was, okay, what have I done in the past that I enjoyed doing and could actually be something I can focus on? And I went back and looked and realized that I teach what I learned. I'm like, I love doing that.
Hmm.
And I'm like, and that was kind of the business, but I really never thought of it as my main thing to do as a career. So I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to make infinite banking the thing that I 100% do by teaching to other people. And that's where I'm at today. That's what I do today. But I've been doing it now for many years. And when I first did it, I said, hey, I'm going to give myself, I think I said a year. like 12 months to see some success with this and make an impact. And it was literally like 2 months. I was like, okay, yeah, this I'm going to be doing this for as long as I possibly can because that's how long it took to make a massive impact. Massive impact. And I was like, this is awesome. And yeah, so I never stopped. I never looked back. Now, if I had to go back and do it again, would there be things I'd do differently? Yes, but I want to share this. So that business that I ended up having to shut down, it went very big and it went down just as quick. It left me with an amount of debt that most people cannot fathom.
Hmm.
And that kind of debt, which is, I'll just be straight honest, is tied to the government, is not fun. And that was a big, huge like fear thing I had
Hmm.
when I left that job. Even though I was going to infinite banking, I still had that over here. But then I had to think differently about it. So instead of why did this happen to me, it's the why did this happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I almost would, well, no, I actually do phrase it this way now sometimes, Jason. I paid a very big fee, if you want to look at it that way, to get to the place that I'm at today. And that is a seven-figure number, by the way. It's a very big number.
I remember you sharing that when we went to that speakers camp in Arizona. We went out and had lunch.
Yeah.
You telling me that, and I was like, oh, this is why Brian is dusk to dawn driving, right,
Mhm.
to take care of this. And that was, and is that true? Like, that's what I thought when we were sitting down having lunch together.
Yeah.
Like, is that one of the drivers? What drives you? Maybe
Part of
that's
it.
it. I love to know what drives you.
I mean, everybody always says family and stuff, but it's not that for me. Everybody always says, "Oh, that I do what I do because of my family and my kids and all that," and I'm straight honest. It's not for me. I view that as my absolute duty, though. My
Mm.
absolute duty and responsibility is to them. But why do I do what I do? Because I love to control my time and I love to do what I do. And so if I have an hour where I can go do something infinite banking related, I will do it because I get to choose to do it. It's not like I have to do this. I want to do this. That is my biggest driving factor right there is controlling time. And Jason, you probably seen me before on presentations and webinars where I'm like, where are you at? I'm like, I'm in an RV or there's a river in the background because I'm camping with my family. There's I get to do all of these things while doing something I love. And that's my driving thing right there.
I love that. So you're aligned. You're aligned. Like we talk about consciousness, right? Subconscious, consciousness, being aligned. Like this is what I've seen you do this. So now
Yeah.
you're aligned. Now you're living it. Now you're teaching it. You said, hey, I'll give myself a year. And in 2 months, you knew.
Yeah.
In 2 months, you knew, like, I'm all in. Because I know now it's like, hey, Brian, would you like to tell your story? I'm in, right? Like
Yeah.
you said, like, I'm all in. I love doing this. I want to share this with people. So,
You
um,
know, and kind of my next phase, I guess, if you want to look at it that way, is one, I'm using policies today. So I'm recapturing debt, paying down debt. I'm doing velocity banking, all the stuff that we talk about, that Jason, you talk about. That's exactly what I am doing. And I need to actually start documenting more of it, just for content and stuff. But that's what I'm doing right now. Paying off some debt. Actually, a HELOC right now as well is actually coming in. It took me about year and a half to get that to the point where I can get a HELOC.
yeah. So you're talking about your debt to income ratio. It took you a couple years to get there. Is that what you're saying? Like with the debt to income? Like,
Not the debt to income. It's just just the cash flow to have the proper cash flow to make it make sense.
okay. Okay.
And also the home that I'm in as well. We had to establish that for a bit before you could actually get a loan on it and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm doing exactly what I'm doing. And then my next phase that I'm really excited about because when you get to a place of I don't want to say calm because there is still a lot of turmoil in our lives. There always is going to be, but not letting it impact you as much is a very powerful place to be. But it's mobile homes.
Hmm.
So I've done a lot of real estate, even done mobile homes. But where I live, within about an hour and a half, there's a lot of that availability and opportunities. And so I'm really excited to get back into that strategy with infinite banking. And there's some guys in my local area that do this, not with infinite banking, but they already do that kind of that investment strategy. So that's my next phase in the next couple of years is to get back into that strategy.
That's exciting. So you got a future plan. You're hearing Brian's thinking going from someone that was just following the common path, following his brother's footsteps, doing what he thought he should do, American dream, wasn't an American dream. And now, we're here
Yeah.
together. We're mentoring thousands of people. We're making an impact on and sharing the story. What would you tell, as we're wrapping this up, like we know your next step, your next phase. What would you tell people, like the best advice you could give to someone who's hearing this and still hasn't started?
Yeah. Two things. Don't sell your dream car. That's my first thing right there. Not really tied to what you just asked, though. Um,
Hey, if you got someone's got a dream car, don't sell it. Okay.
yeah, I did that. And it was one of the biggest regrets I have. And I don't have a lot of regrets because I don't believe in that, but
Got
that
the
is one.
Cougar?
No, I have that still. I have my Mercury Cougar, but I had a 65 Shelby Cobra replica that I built.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, and the car, if I had had it today, it's worth twice as much as what I sold it for. I don't think about that, just but here's what I would say is if you're learning about something, if you have even an inkling that it could help you, take action. Because if you want different results in your life, you've got to do something different, and that starts today. There's right there. That's why I have that there, by the way. My brother heard me talk so many times about stuff. He finally got me that right there. It's
Oh, that's cool. You know what? That's how good God is. I've been wondering and wanting to ask you about that. I'm not lying. For over a month now, I almost asked you on the AMA the other day. I was going to ask you during this. And did I ever ask you about it?
no, no, you have not.
And what just happened? You literally pointed at it and you told me your brother got that for you. How cool is that? Now I know the story. So, anyhow,
Yep.
just pointing out to people, the signs are always there. They're always showing up for you. It just matters if you're ready to see them.
Yes, exactly. And that's my one big thing I always tell people. It says, you don't want to look back 5 years, and say, or be 5 years from now looking back and saying, I wish I had done that. I wish. And you'll hear a lot of people at the end of life say that. I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done more of this. I wish this. You do not want to be saying, I wish I had done infinite banking or made that phone call or picked up the phone or whatever it is 5 years from now. Because it is the number one comment or response we get with talking to clients. I wish I had done this X number of years ago, or I wish I had scheduled a call X number of years ago. That's the number one thing. So don't be that person. That would be my advice right there.
And whatever's holding you back, there are answers out there. Brian and I will help you solve the answers. We'll meet you where you're at. We'll show you where you're going. But Brian,
Good.
again, I'm really grateful for your courage. I'm really grateful for your vulnerability because I didn't know your whole story. So part of this was for me, but I figured everyone else wanted to hear about your story as well. Any departing wisdom as we wind up?
I mean, life's an adventure. It's, if you stop learning, I would say the adventure does stop. So don't stop learning. Don't stop, being curious. That's one of the things that I've experienced is meeting people that I've learned from, and that's one thing that somebody, I can't remember who it was now, but they told me that it says always be curious
Hmm.
because if you're not curious, you're not learning. If you're not learning, you're going the opposite direction, which means you're dying. And I was like, man, that's a very powerful thing that he said to me. And so, like, I always want to be doing something. I always want to be learning. I always want to be taking action because that's what life's about. So that would just be my kind of take right there.
Well, that's brilliant advice. So, Brian, again, super blessed to have you on. I can see in the chat that it's lighting up. People are excited that you were here. So, appreciate you coming in as a founding. Well, I'm making you, you are a founding father, my brother. Like we are changing this because we cannot have the state of America stay the way it is. We need to bring all of this back to the you and me level. And I know from just talking to you offline and things that you believe in that wholeheartedly as well. So.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, some comment here about I purchased a policy. Yeah. And actually some of our colleagues have done the exact same thing. It's not easy to do. I'll just be straight honest on that one. It is very, very challenging. The reason why I was able to do it is because I'm in the industry. That's why. The average person is typically not going to come across a policy for sale. There's not like there's a big market out there or somewhere you can go to do that. It's usually through the grapevine from what I've experienced. I don't know, Jason, if you have any other
No,
experience on that.
I saw the comment too, and from yeah, I saw the comment, and I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking I used to know who I would go to, like who I would ask,
Right.
and then things like you and I have seen the industry changing, right? Like the one guarantee in life has changed, and I saw that they've started making that more difficult than it was 2 years ago. Like two
Yeah.
years ago, we had a list of people that couldn't get qualified that can go buy a policy, and we'd hook them up with someone and a couple people. Like we have people on our team that I'll have on this show as well that have gone through that, right? Multiple
Yep.
people. So,
Yeah. Yeah, someone says, "Can you get me one?" Not really. It's not how it kind of works usually. Because I I know of two that were for sale, but I don't think they are anymore. But I mean, we might come across maybe one a year,
And the
maybe.
question I have for you too, Lee, reach out to me directly. So we
Yeah.
just got yours going, right? So you can do a lot of things with what you have. You can make it go faster. There's more stuff that you can do with what you have. And I want to know like why would you want another one when you have one that you can drive forward? So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and then like some people have always asked us like, "Hey,
Oh, friend.
why would you want to buy an existing policy? Why wouldn't you get one on yourself?" So in my situation, I was buying one that was already funded for many years, so it was already pretty efficient.
Yeah.
That's why. So I was buying the efficiency of the policy, and well, I won't get into how I acquired it, but and it was a very good deal, and I couldn't pass it up, and I got that policy, put that thing to work, and it's been awesome. Oh, also the individual that is the insured is half my not quite half my age, but they're in their 20s, late 20s. So they're going to outlive me. So when I look at this thing, I said, "Hey, wait a second. This is going to be an awesome generational wealth policy, not for me, because the death benefit is not going to be on me, of course, but for my kids and my grandkids. They'll be able to experience that death benefit because that person's going to live, for another 50, 60, 70 years."
Wow. Wow. And that thing will be astronomical because you're not going to let it surrender. You'll have it set up where you're teaching the systems and processes to your children, right? And now they're going to know
Oh,
what to
yeah.
do with that when that multiplies. That's the multiplication piece. That's the time piece. That's the uninterrupted compounding
Yeah.
that people forget about because we don't think about what's happening 20, 30, 40, 50 years, like you just mentioned. So,
Yeah, it's I get excited just thinking about it, that policy and stuff, and yeah, and then putting it in the vault and using that stuff and seeing the numbers, it's like it just affirms the direction. I was like, man, this is cool. So
well, that's incredible stuff. Again, thank you. Thank you for being here. Everyone who was able to
yeah,
stick around a little longer, thank you for the extra time as well. Pouts, blessed to have you here, brother. And I know I'm going to see you pretty soon. So I'll see you in a couple
sounds good,
hours, a
man.
couple days, whatever. See you soon. But thank you for being here.
Wow, what an episode. I'm so blessed to have Brian share his journey with all of you to show you how he solved his money problems. And you saw that things kept happening for him, right? So if you're enjoying this content, help us spread this message, help it get out to more people. So smash the button, ring the bell, and like this content so this can reach more people that need the help. I'll see all of you in the next video right here.